Chapter 6. How did you become a multi-millionaire? I'll discuss some of the key points regarding the transition to economic and personal freedom here, but please understand that it takes more than a few words on a sheet of paper to explain the process. If it was as easy as others tend to make it, everyone would be financially loaded, wouldn't they? The answer I'm about to give you follows on from the question about how I got started. If you want a more in-depth answer and description of the pathway I took and the strategies I used, you can find the exact step-by-step process in the 3 books I've written on this subject. Together, they'll tell you the in-depth story of how I went from broke to millionaire in 3 years and 8 months. Please read them in the order that they were written. Book number 1 is The Psychology of Wealth. Book number 2 is The Mechanics of Wealth. And book number 3 is The Essentials of Wealth. I only mentioned these books because the conversation we can have after you read them is going to be more meaningful and fertile than the conversation we can have now. But to briefly explain how I achieved my economic freedom, we've got to go back to the question 1, 2, and 3 above. They explain how I got started, how I kept focused, and the key attributes you need to become successful. I term the how-to stuff of making money the mechanics of wealth. But the most important thing to understand is that the mechanics of wealth are not much use without the adoption of effective mind flexibility. As mentioned earlier, mindset is the worst place to start because the power of enculturation holds most people within its grip. Without rebuilding your money foundations, you won't have the right psychology to support your wealth journey. Remember that the odds of becoming wealthy are firmly stacked against you. Understanding the psychology of wealth puts the odds back in your favor. In terms of the mechanics of wealth, I started with real estate by buying an old house and borrowing 90% of the money required from a bank. Then I borrowed money for the stamp duty I needed, along with mortgage insurance, the deposit, and acquisition costs from friends. I then set about renovating the old house, doing all the work myself. 6 months after purchase, I had a bank inspector come and revalue the property and was surprised to see that it had substantially increased. In fact, it had doubled. I then borrowed the equity I had gained so I could purchase another property, which I also renovated. I repeated this process again and again. All this time, I worked 4 part-time jobs. The reason for 4 part-time jobs, as opposed to a full-time job, was to work more days and more hours so I could pay back as much debt as I possibly could, as quickly as I could. In my spare time, I learned everything about real estate investing and share trading. As my knowledge and skills grew, I purchased more properties. From there, I progressed to the stock market, trading shares and derivatives with leverage. Then I moved into the world of business. An understanding of economic cycles and which wealth vehicles to use for any point in the cycle was pivotal to increasing the rate at which I increased my wealth. If you fail to understand the various stages of economic cycles, you might find yourself in the wrong wealth medium at the wrong time and in the wrong part of the cycle. Potentially, this could lead to disastrous and costly mistakes. Remember that wealth is not necessarily about getting more money and taking on more risk. You can start by simply learning how to multiply the value of the money you already have without having to get more money to do it. And for this to work, you must know what wealth instrument to use and what part of an economic cycle will give you the best effect.